Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan is observing National Defence Day to pay tribute to its armed forces for thwarting India's attack and safeguarding Pakistan's sovereignty in the 1965 war. In his message, President Arif Alvi said Pakistan makes serious efforts towards securing peace in the region, but India keeps hostile designs. While Prime Minister Imran Khan said in 1965 the nation and military proved that it's not the size but the courage and devotion that matters the most. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is systematically trying to change the demography of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a tweet, Qureshi said Pakistan will continue to raise voice for Kashmiri's right to self-determination. He said Pakistan has failed India's repeated attempts to get the Kashmir issue removed from the UN Security Council's agenda. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred over 300 Kashmiris since New Delhi stripped the region of its autonomy and imposed a curfew in August last year. Turkey has warned Greece of painful consequences if it does not enter talks over the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Talking to reporters in Ankara, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey has political, economic and military might needed to cast off immoral maps. The two NATO members have been at odds over territorial claims in the resource-rich waters. News coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we'll have the news in detail. Pakistan is observing National Defence Day to pay tribute to its armed forces for thwarting India's attack and safeguarding Pakistan's sovereignty in the 1965 war. The day began with a 31-gun salute in Islamabad and 21-gun salutes in the provincial capitals. Special ceremonies were held at the mausoleums of the founder of the nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and the Pakistan military's general headquarters. In his message, President Arif Alvi said Pakistan makes serious efforts towards securing peace in the region, but India keeps hostile designs. While Prime Minister Imran Khan said in 1965 the nation and military proved that it's not the size but the courage and devotion that matters the most. In Rawalpindi, Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa laid a wreath at the Martyrs Monument at General Headquarters. Later today, Alvi will confer military awards upon officers and soldiers at the President House. As Pakistan celebrates its Defence Day on September 6th to mark its valiant rebuke in the 1965 war against India, the conventional warfare between the two nuclear-capable neighbouring countries has transcended from battle gear into many other trajectories. More in this report by Indus News correspondent Isan Naqvi.
On September 6th, Pakistan commemorates the incredible defense against Indian infiltration in the 1965 war. Which left New Delhi in tatters on the world stage. Despite massive advantage in numbers and superior war machinery, New Delhi was forced to lick its wounds in the face of Pakistan's stern response. But defense experts believe the warfare has completely changed since then. Lieutenant General Qayyum accused India of sponsoring terrorism on Pakistani soil from across the border under its policy of defensive offense.
It's a cyber war, it's an information war, it's a propaganda war, it is a psychological war, it is economic strangulation, and it is terrorism. State terrorism India has launched from across the border or from the western border, taking Afghanistan as the launching pad. They have gone on to hybrid warfare. They don't want the kinetic war, and the conventional war is out. only limited actions can take place. But now they do it the indirect strategy.
1965 war veteran Lieutenant General retired Talat Masood says India has turned to economic warfare as a tool against Pakistan to destabilize it.
There has been a fundamental transformation as far as warfare is concerned. The main challenge now is that both are nuclear countries. So it's very difficult to really think in terms of a conventional warfare. Their motive is to bleed Pakistan economically, so that a large number, divisions and forces are deployed on the border.
Defense analysts across the board say while there remains a constant threat of a full-scale war due to the issue of Indian-occupied Kashmir, only a durable and sustainable solution to the outstanding disputes can ensure peace between the neighboring nuclear powers. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is systematically trying to change the demography of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a tweet, Qureshi said Pakistan will continue to raise voice for Kashmiri's right to self-determination. Qureshi said New Delhi's attempts to have its occupation of Jammu and Kashmir removed from the UN Security Council agenda has failed. Indian occupation forces have martyred over 300 Kashmiris since New Delhi stripped the region of its autonomy and imposed a curfew in August last year. Now, the Taliban say a senior delegation has returned to Qatar, paving the way for the start of the peace talks with the Afghan government. In an interview, Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen said efforts are being made to resolve issues and a date for the talks will be announced soon. Meanwhile, US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has also left for Qatar to push for intra-Afghan negotiations. The US State Department said all sides must remove obstacles for talks and seize the opportunity for peace. Earlier, Afghanistan's National Reconciliation Council chief Abdullah conditioned the negotiations with a ceasefire. He said the intra-Afghan talks will be carried out in several phases with Qatar set to host the crucial dialogue. Kabul says Taliban have killed 2 people in Parwan province's eastern district of Sayyid Khail. Parwan's governor Muhammad Osmaniyar said one of the victims was working for the Bagram intelligence agency, but he said identities of the deceased are yet to be confirmed. The governor said 2 militants came on a motorcycle to conduct the assassination and both escaped. The Taliban have not yet commented on this incident. Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran is continuing to increase the stockpile of enriched uranium in violation of the 2015 nuclear deal. In a confidential report, the IAEA said that Iran's stockpile now stands at over 10 times the agreed limit. The agency said that Iran's low-enriched uranium stockpile grew by 533 kilograms to over 2,100 in just over 3 months. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action allows Tehran to only keep a stockpile of just over 200 kilograms. The report's release comes after the IAEA officials inspected one of Iran's 2 former nuclear sites. Meanwhile, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has bemoaned Tehran's friends for not standing up to the United States. In an interview, Rouhani said friends of Iran should have condemned sanctions on Tehran during the coronavirus pandemic. He said that if the US had a bit of humanity, it would have lifted sanctions on Iran for the duration of the health crisis. Rouhani said no one came to Iran's help in its fight against the pandemic. The United States has threatened to impose sanctions on whoever conducts business with Iran. Iran is the worst hit by pandemic in the Middle East, with more than 22,000 deaths. Moving on now, the Saudi-led coalition forces say they have destroyed an explosive-laden Houthi drone in the Yemeni airspace. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki Al-Malki said the drone was meant to hit civilian settlements in the kingdom. Al-Maliki said the unmanned aerial vehicle was destroyed before it could launch any explosives. The Houthis have not commented on the development yet. Saudi-led military coalition and the rebels are at war since the 2015 after Houthis overran much of Yemen, including the capital city of Sana'a. Turkey's defense ministry says it has neutralized 320 terrorists in the ongoing Operation Claw Tiger in northern Iraq. In a statement, the ministry said search and screening activities part of Operation Claw Tiger have been completed in HOUTHI region. Turkish forces also seized and destroyed weapons, ammunition and other materials from 269 shelters and 53 caves in the region. The operation in the HOUTHI region was launched on June 16th to ensure the safety of the Turkish people and borders by neutralizing the threat of the PKK and its other terrorist groups. Ankara claims PKK is responsible for the deaths of 40,000 people, including women, children and infants. Meanwhile, Turkey has warned Greece of painful consequences if it does not enter talks over the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Talking to reporters in Ankara, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey has political, economic and military might needed to cast off immoral maps. Erdogan said at every opportunity Ankara expressed its readiness for an equal share as long as it is just and fair. The president said Greece does not recognize Turkey's right. Earlier, Greece pulled out of the NATO-backed talks with Turkey to reduce tensions after Ankara agreed to the dialogue. The two NATO members have been at odds over territorial claims in the resource-rich waters. Mexico says it has recorded nearly 123,000 extra deaths during the pandemic, along with another 67,000 confirmed COVID-19 fatalities. Meanwhile, India has registered more than 90,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 879,000 lives and infected over 26.8 million people. More details in this report.
With the US, India and parts of South America already struggling to contain the mass spread of COVID-19, the pandemic has now started gaining strength again in Europe. In the US, Florida state has urged people to remain vigilant over the Labor Day weekend and follow social distancing protocols. In Brazil's Rio de Janeiro, government issued similar warnings as Independence Day weekend sent people to the country's beaches in droves, despite mounting numbers of new infections and deaths.
I'm looking around and I barely see anyone wearing a face mask here. We are not chill about the pandemic, but we go out a little for some recreation. Go out with my daughter and the dog for walks, but we only stay for a little while and we go.
In Italy, rising numbers of deaths and new clusters have the government worried, but thousands gathered in Rome to protest against the mandatory mask wearing in public. Over in Australia too, police and protesters opposing restrictions clashed after an extension in the lockdown in Victoria. The state accounts for 75% of the country's total cases and deaths.
There is only one option, and that is to do this in a series of steady and safe steps. You can't run out of lockdown, because all you're doing is running into a third wave and we'll all be locked up again. I want a Christmas that is as close to normal as possible, and this is the only way. These steps are the only way that we will get to that point.
Meanwhile, in Asia, India's caseload continues to rise as governments find it increasingly hard to contain the spread of the disease. For yet another day, the country recorded over 1,000 deaths in a day, taking the tally to 70,626. Mainland China, with 10 new imported cases, has marked the 21st consecutive day of no cases of local transmission. South Korea's new cases are clustered around the Greater Seoul area, but for a fourth straight day, less than 200 cases have been reported.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's COVID-19 mortality rate continues to drop as the country reported 2 deaths overnight. The Health Ministry says the number of active cases has reduced to 6,269. The ministry said nearly 286,000 patients have recovered across the country. It said new infections rate has also decreased as 484 people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. The ministry said the total number of deaths has reached 6,342, while the number of confirmed cases is over 298,000. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories. Palestine has condemned Serbia's pledge to move its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Palestine's ambassador to Serbia, Mohammed Nabhan, said the move violates the international law and the United Nations resolutions. Nabhan said the move will harm the traditional friendly relations between the Palestinians and Serbians. He said the move will also harm the rights of the Palestinians. Nabhan said numerous UN resolutions recognize Jerusalem as an occupied city. The Palestinian condemnation comes after the United States said Serbia has committed to move its embassy and commercial office in Jerusalem later this month.
Serbia is committed to opening a commercial office in Jerusalem this month and to move its embassy to Jerusalem in July. That's fantastic. That's a big thing. That's a very big statement, and we appreciate that very much.
Meanwhile, in Lebanon, no signs of life have been found after massive rescue efforts continued for 3 days in a building's rubble destroyed in last month's Beirut port explosion. Volunteers team, including experts from Chile, cleared 95% of rubble, but they were unable to find the source of the reading. This dashed the soaring hopes that someone could be rescued alive from under the collapsed building. A specialist sensor equipment detected a pulsing signal under the rubble, giving signs of life earlier on Thursday. The port blast killed about 190 people and left thousands of others injured and missing. Meanwhile, Washington alleges China has taken the most active role among the countries looking to interfere in the U.S. presidential elections in November. At a press briefing, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien said anyone attempting to meddle will face extraordinary consequences. O'Brien said Washington has warned Beijing, Moscow, Tehran and some other countries against any such move. O'Brien said despite the measures, the foreign powers will still try to spread propaganda during the election season. He said the U.S. intelligence will monitor such activities and will do everything to protect the sanctity of American democracy.
There's always going to be propaganda. There's always going to be efforts to influence us. And again, we know that the Chinese have taken the most active role, but the Russians and the Iranians and other countries are involved as well. So we're going to keep monitoring it, and we're going to do everything we can to protect the sanctity of our election. That's the foundation of our democracy. That's what makes us America. And we're just not going to tolerate these other countries trying to get involved in our elections.
Now, New York's Attorney General Letitia James says a grand jury will be formed to investigate the death of a black man, Daniel Prude, in police custody. Prude died after being suffocated by Rochester police officers who detained him in a sped mood. In a statement, James said the Prude family and the Rochester community have been through great pain and anguish over his death. She said the Attorney General's office will immediately empanel a grand jury to investigate the matter. The move has been welcomed by Rochester's Mayor Lovely Warren and New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo. Protests erupted in Rochester City this week after the Prude family released footage from his arrest in March. Now, in the U.S., Kenosha police shooting victim Jacob Blake has pleaded not guilty to criminal charges filed prior to the shooting on August 23rd. Blake entered the plea through his lawyer during a live-streamed court hearing, his first public appearance since he was shot by the police. Blake's lawyer, Patrick Cafferty, said his client did not have a prior criminal record and no convictions in any U.S. state. Blake, who is in hospital paralyzed, is accused of criminal trespass, sexual assault and disorderly conduct based on his statements by his former girlfriend. The prosecutor, Zeke Weidenfeld, agreed to a confidential bail for Blake, citing his gunshot wounds.
I would ask that the $500 cash that's already been posted on the warrant be applied as a cash condition of the bond. I would ask for additional conditions of no violent contact with the person referenced in the complaint with the initials LNB or her children. Also, no contact with her residence. I would ask for additional conditions that the defendant not possess any weapons and that he not leave the state of Wisconsin for any purpose other than for medical treatment.
Well, the court has set the trial to begin on November 9th with the selection of a grand jury. Now, moving on, Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez says his country wants to forge stronger and deeper cooperation with China in the post-pandemic world. He said this during a video address at the China International Trade Fair in Beijing. He acknowledged the world community shared struggles during the pandemic. The president said state-level cooperation between both countries will benefit the people and businesses of both countries.
Cooperation between China and Argentina not only helps the development of businesses, but also benefits people in both countries. High-tech companies do not come out of thin air, but need promotion and encouragement by the government at the state level.
Moving on now, Lithuania's Foreign Minister Linas Linkevičius has called on the European Union to take concrete action to help Belarus over its prevailing situation. In an interview, he said EU's lack of action over the issue has undermined the credibility of the foreign policy of European nations. Linkevičius said the bloc needs to encourage the values of democracy in Belarus to counter Russia's influence in the country. He said EU should impose sanctions on Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and his government, like Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia did. Meanwhile, Minsk's riot police have detained dozens of protesters, mostly students, last night as the protests entered the fourth week. Massive crowds are also expected today as protesters continue to demand the resignation of President Lukashenko. Now in Bangladesh, at least 20 people have died in a blast at a mosque in central Narayanganj district. Health officials say 25 of some 40 injured worshippers are in a critical condition. Fire officials suspect a gas leak to be the cause of the explosion. Officials say the blast went off when worshippers were about to leave the mosque after the night prayers. The authorities say firemen managed to bring the flames under control in about half an hour. The Bangladesh Fire Service and Civil Defence have formed a committee to investigate the incident. Now over to Mali, where the coup leaders have started talks with the country's opposition on its promised transition to civilian rule. The talks are being held under Junta Chief Assimi Goïta in the capital, Bamako. On August 18, the military took over the government after toppling former President Boubacar Keïta in a coup. They had pledged to step down after an undefined transitional period. Meanwhile, the West African leaders will meet the junta via video conference on Monday to discuss the situation in Mali. Staying in Mali, where militants have killed 10 soldiers near the west-central town of Guer at Mauritania border. The attack was the deadliest against the armed forces since an August 18th military coup in the country. In a statement, the military said reinforcements have been dispatched to the attack site. International powers fear the ousting of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta can further destabilize the West African nation. Now moving on to Sudan, whose power-sharing government and a major rebel group have agreed to achieve democracy and make the country a secular state. The government agreed the move with the Sudan's People's Liberation Movement North, led by Abdulaziz Al-Hilu. The group had not joined a deal signed on Monday to end wars stemming from the rule of ousted leader Omar al-Bashir. The group said Sudan is a multi-racial and multi-religious society, and the deal affirms full recognition of these diversities. The declaration said the state shall not establish an official religion and no citizen shall be discriminated on the basis of religion. 3 major groups signed Monday's deal, including factions from Darfur, where more than 300,000 people have been killed since 2003. Now, Sudan has also declared a national state of emergency for 3 months because of floods that have killed nearly 100 people this year. The country's Security and Defense Council has designated Sudan a natural disaster zone. Authorities say the floods inflicted damage on more than 500,000 people and caused the collapse of more than 100,000 homes. Sudan's rainy season begins in June and continues through to October. Now, Colombia's military has taken on a new enemy and is fighting deforestation in the country's national parks. The country's military is one of the most well-trained and well-equipped in Latin America. President Ivan Duque launched Operation Artemisa last year to battle against deforestation in the Amazon. Colombia's Defense Minister Carlos Trujillo said the military has recovered 248 hectares of deforested land in the La Macarena National Natural Park so far. He said the military has also arrested 8 people for invading areas of special ecological importance, damaging natural resources and trafficking firearms.
This is one of the most important campaigns by public security forces under President Ivan Duque's defense and security policy, who for the first time declared water, biodiversity and environment as resources of prevailing national interest, recognizing them as national strategic assets.
With that, we come to the end of the bulletin. For the latest updates, you can log on to our website, indus.news. Take care.